This is the Drive Time Debrief, episode 94. Welcome to the Drive Time Debrief with the Whole Physician, a podcast to burnout-proof your medical career with candor, humor, and encouragement. You've spent tens of thousands of hours learning how to care for others, but now it's time to learn proven tools to care for yourself. If you're tired of feeling stuck, disillusioned, and exhausted, you're in the right place. Start your journey to bring back contentment and purpose with the power of your mind. And now, here are your hosts, 3 board-certified emergency physicians, Drs. Morrison, Kazir, and Dinsmore.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Amanda.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Kendra.
And today we are so excited because we have a special guest, Dr. Laura Fortner. She is a board-certified OBGYN and a medical malpractice coach. You will remember her from our podcast number 27 on what to do when you get sued. Just as a reminder, if you have any friend who is unfortunately going through that, please listen to that because there is help and you don't need to go through it alone. But today she joins us for something different, memory reconsolidation. We were recently at a coaching conference together and we're super bummed because our talk was at the exact same time as hers. So we missed it, but it worked out for everyone. There's always a silver lining because she promised to tell us all the things here. So crisis averted, and now we all get to learn what her presentation was about. So thank you so much, Laura, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, especially with you 3.
Okay, Dr. Fortner, remind our listeners a little bit about you, your training, where you live, and don't forget about the cattle ranch part because, you're my sister from another mister, so.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so I live in rural Ohio, very tiny town. We have about 130-acre farm, and that's what my husband does. I am an OBGYN. And and a med mal coach. I got into that because of getting sued in the past, which is very common if you're a physician, especially in the high risk specialties. So I'm here to normalize the conversation, but also I really wanted to talk to people about how they can help themselves because I think it's so important. I remember going through my case, not having anyone to turn to, being told not to talk about it, all the things. And I just think that's wrong. And we need to change that culture. So that's why I'm here. And we're going to talk about memory consolidation, which is something that I found through healing while I was going through a 10-year case, basically one case, trial and dismissal and everything beyond. So that's why I'm here. And I have 4 kids. They range from 24 to 14, and it is crazy like everybody else I know with working full time and helping other physicians through med mal and being a mom, but I love it and I wouldn't change it. So
awesome. And I'm so glad that you said that, Laura, about the fact that it was 10 years and you went to trial because when statistics are put out there, there's a very small amount of med mal cases that go to trial. So I'm glad you said that because I think that's just not talked about either because we want to focus on all the majority of the cases getting settled or just not going to trial. But you had the unfortunate experience of going through trial, and I think that's why you're so good at what you do. You are known for your niche in med mal coaching. What got you interested in memory reconsolidation?
Yeah, so through my journey of healing, and like you said earlier, I am unique in the fact that, first of all, my case lasted 10 years, which most cases do not. The average time is 4.9 years. I just want to put that out there. But I went through every single gamut of the legal process, from dismissal to actually getting it reinstated to trial, then appeal after appeal. And it did not go in my favor. And I think that also is a really good testament of why I am the person to do this, because if I can come out of it and still practice, still have joy in medicine, love what I'm doing, anybody can. And I got excited about memory reconsolidation when it really transformed and healed me. I went through a 3-week-long trial, was on the stand for 6 hours total. And during that time, it is something that none of us are prepared for. And we do have to withstand things that perhaps we don't want to withstand, hear things that are untrue about ourselves. And that whole experience really created a trauma pathway, PTSD like. Now, I will say it impacted my PTSD like trauma pathway in my brain, because typically these pathways get created when we get sued as physicians. And we can talk more about that. But I knew after that trial that I had to do something different to heal, because it was very traumatizing for me. And I did love medicine. I wanted to go back, but I felt that maybe I should quit, like every other physician feels, and maybe I'm not cut out for it. So I went and got a form of memory consolidation, and it changed me. What it does is erase the trauma pathway. And we can talk a little bit more about that exactly, so you can kind of get the gist of it. But it is something that we all as physicians need to know about. And when we go get help, which I say when, because I think every physician should go get help if they're in this predicament and getting sued. When you go get help, this is something that you want to know that your person can do for you.
So why don't you start by giving us the basics about memory reconsolidation? Like, what in the world are you even talking about?
Yeah. So memory reconsolidation was discovered in 1981. It's a biological fact of the brain. And basically what they discovered is when human beings like ourselves witness things that become traumatic. And to back up a little bit, we have to talk about the definition of trauma. And what the definition of trauma I use, and we all should be using, is anything that still impacts you today. You still think about, still has a psychological effect on you today, even if it happened in the past, right? Or if you're going through it currently, it's impacting you in some way. You're thinking about it, and and you get triggered, something happens and it'll instantly come up, right? Or you'll get intrusive thoughts about it. These are things that you have built a trauma-like pathway in the brain. And that pathway, what memory reconsolidation was, it's so interesting. But when they discovered it, what they realized is when human beings witness things that human beings shouldn't witness, which is what we do every day. This is what our jobs entail us to do, right? We're giving CPR on someone and they die. We're operating on them and something goes awry. There's a complication. We are witnessing things as humans that most people don't witness in their lifetime. And this is not normal to the human brain. So the human brain labels this as trauma. A trauma-like pathway gets created. It activates your amygdala. And then there is a memory that gets formed when this happens. And that memory is called an implicit memory. There's different types of memory we have in our brain, right? And the implicit memory is what is important to know in this equation, because that implicit memory holds our emotion and our psychological impact of the event. It holds it there. And the discovery of memory reconsolidation is our memories can change. They're malleable. And you can actually change this memory to change the psychological impact and actually erase the trauma response that you have when you get a trigger and when you think about what happened to you. It is incredibly important. And there's decades of research on this. And it seems as if people really don't know about it. And I think as physicians, this is something that we should actually learn in med school. I mean, it should be part of our curriculum and we should know how to do it ourselves.
Yeah, that's amazing, because some of the books, and we'll ask you some references later on. They're published recently, and it was a psychotherapist writing the book who just found out about it on accident. Like they didn't even have training on it. So I feel a little bit better myself, since people that are deep within this field also don't realize that this is available. So what are some examples of situations when memory reconsolidation would be really helpful?
Yeah. So anything that still psychologically impacts you today, or that, anything that represents or something that happens to you now that represents the past and you start thinking about it, a trigger of some sort. So in medicine, we can talk about medicine specifically. Events that are very common are complications that are unexpected of patients. Okay. Any of sort. Somebody young comes in, you're giving CPR and they don't make it and they were expected to make it, right? Anyone that is operating or doing a procedure and that goes awry and was unexpected. That one case that came through the ER that you thought for sure was this, but then turned out to be something else, right? Or that one patient that you hear about 2 weeks later that actually ends up dying after you thought was going to do well, right? Like all of those things, any of those things. And really, it's bad outcomes, unexpected outcomes, things that we think we might have been able to control, but we really couldn't control, right? And getting sued is a huge one for us. And many of us either develop the trauma pathway with the bad outcome that happened or actually getting served papers wherever you were. So for me, it wasn't, I had a delivery back in 01 and I didn't have any traumatic event with that delivery. Like there was nothing there that triggered anything. But when I got served papers 14 years later, when the child was 14 and the sheriff came to my front door to deliver the papers, and I had 3 little kids with me answering the door, that was very traumatic for me. And that memory, I can tell it to you in detail, right? But now I can tell it to you without crying and without the trauma response, and really very neutral and at peace with it because of the work of memory reconsolidation.
I think I can think of some examples in the ER where, like, the level of violence that I saw, like, I probably knew in that moment, like, that I don't know if I'm going to be okay after this. But I didn't know that there was, we were just like, keep your head down, get 5 stars, go see the next patient, apologize for the wait. I just wish I would have known that this happened, that this is a modality back in my day.
Yeah. And you know what? I love that you brought that up because it's not only violence with patients and things going on in that realm, but it's also within the medical culture and community. So there are lots of people that I work with that have in residency had an attending that impacted them. And I really like to share with people that we don't want to grade trauma, meaning that one trauma is not worse than another in our brains. If it psychologically impacted us, it was trauma. So somebody who thought this attending was super mean to them and the words that they said to them really impacted them that they can't stop thinking about it is trauma to that person. Whereas another person might not have had the same experience. And so you don't want to grade any of this. This is normal neuroscience, what I'm talking about here. So really want to emphasize there's no right or wrong or perfect or not perfect. It is just what it is. And if your brain registered it as traumatizing, that's when the amygdala gets activated and a trauma response occurs. And that implicit memory holds all that information. And that implicit memory comes up every time then you get a trigger. And so it's important to know that there in that pathway, you can actually not erase the experience, right? You'll remember the experience and you'll still remember it in detail, most likely, but you will erase the response that you have, the psychological and the emotional response and the physical response, because we get physical symptoms too, heart racing, palpitations, nausea, all that stuff. All that stuff can go away. And it's it's crazy that we don't know about this. And like, to your point, Amanda, is like the people in the therapy world don't know about this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm even thinking this clearly would apply to things outside of medicine too, getting served divorce papers, finding out that your partner's cheating on you, something, a horrible diagnosis with your child or something like that. I could see how that would be
All of
really
it.
helpful too. Yeah. So
Yes.
what are is there just one kind of memory reconsolidation or are there different techniques? Tell me more.
So there's different techniques and there's different ways to go about it. So if you had something very recently happen to you, you can do something called EMDR, which is, I think it works extremely well for recent events. It really helps you. So that's what I did right after my trial. And it just totally stopped the trauma response of that trial. Like that trial, even though the trial did not go my way, and I can remember vivid details of the trial of actually my lawyer knowing what the outcome was when the judge came out, sort of like the way things were or whatever was happening in the courtroom. And I was clueless, him putting his hand on me. And like, I can remember that in detail. And I knew, it was not going to be an outcome I wanted. And so, those kind of details you'll still remember, but like for me, I was able to take away that whole response of like just that emotional and physical things that were going on totally went away for me. And that's what happens with people, right? Like if something happens in the ER, and many of you sometimes don't want to go in the same room that it happened in, or you're walking into work and you're starting to get the symptoms, you're driving to work, you're getting the symptoms, right? Like all of these things, you can do something for them.
Well, you just described back in the olden days, every trip into work, I would start getting, oh my God, the physical effects for sure. So EMDR, are there other ones?
Yeah. So there's also other ones that I personally like the most, which I think works the most for people, is to work on actually changing the emotion that's in that memory. Because most of us, what happens with that memory, every time you think about the event, you'll bring the memory up, and then that memory, whatever emotion you've attached to it, typically you make that emotion worse. Like you compound that because we're typically negatively thinking about it. And if in terms of medical malpractice, we go down the path of, oh, I should quit medicine. I'm not cut out for this. I'm not good. I'm a bad doc. People will think I'm terrible. My reputation's going to be ruined. My income's going to go away. How am I going to support my family? I'm going to lose my license. Like these are streams of thought that happen because the memory comes up and we start experiencing those emotions and physical and emotional symptoms. And so there is a 4-step process that I kind of created out of all this to really work on that emotion, to take that emotion away. Because most of us, when physicians come to me to help them, we're wanting to feel calm, peace, no matter what the outcome happens with med mal or the bad event, right? Or peer review. I've got several people that come to me because they're being peer reviewed and proctored and all those things, right? So it's really working to get them peace no matter what happens, and neutral in it so that those responses aren't occurring. And so we work on the emotion part of that. There's also, so I do a lot of emotion and how you're feeling, but I also do verbal. Lots of docs are very logical people and want the logic. The problem is the primitive brain overrides the logic, right? But sometimes we've got to do storytelling and logic, doing it a logical way instead of the emotional way. There's 4 different components of that implicit memory that can be worked on, and they all have different modalities to do it. So you're not stuck. Let's say you go and try to get EMDR and it really didn't help you. You need to just go do something else, right? Your brain wants you to do a different way in order to make that work.
So you told us about your own experience with EMDR, during or right after your trial, and you said that works really well for acute scenarios. Like what happens in a memory reconsolidation session, how you do it, or my understanding is that it's taking that memory from being relocated in like the amygdala and hippocampus and like moving it more towards the prefrontal cortex, or what's going on actually?
So implicit memory is connected to the amygdala and so it every time you get a trigger event, that implicit memory will come up along with the symptoms, right? It basically goes trigger event, amygdala, then implicit memory comes up. Okay. Now you unlock this memory in different ways. So you have to, So what happens with clients and with EMDR is we're asking them to think about it. Now, a lot of times, and just fun fact for everyone out there, you don't even have to tell us exactly what has happened to make this work. Okay. But you have to think about it, right? Sometimes, I have people verbalize it because I think it's helpful, but you have to think about the prior event or trigger. And you always want to go to a trigger first before you work with the real event that happened. So you have to bring that up to unlock this memory. Now, this memory, to get it unlocked, is like a combination safe. Okay. So it is like a combination, and it doesn't, that's why I say, sometimes you have to work on it a couple times. It's not always instantaneous, but when you unlock it, then it stays open. This memory stays open for about 4 hours. And that's when you can do the reconsolidation of reconsolidating it to a positive, like if you were talking about emotion, you're going to reconsolidate towards a positive emotion. Now, what does that emotion entail? Sometimes it's anger, because if you look at the emotional scale, shame is all the way at the bottom. And a lot of us have shame around this. Mine was shame. Okay. And in order for me to move up, anger is even better than shame. So I could actually reconsolidate that memory initially with anger and then move up to neutral. Typically, we're moving to neutral and peace. We're not moving to, oh, I'm happy and joyful, because it's not possible. Right away. And so, but you have to unlock the memory, bring it up, and then you have to do a series of things in order for this to work. And that series entails you feeling the symptoms initially of what it feels like the physical and emotional. You got to feel it. What does it make you feel like when you bring this memory up, right? You get a trigger. So for instance, for me, I would see a nurse that was part of the scenario of all of this. She was a trigger for me. And so this nurse, every time I'd see her, it'd bring up my symptoms. I have to feel those symptoms. And then you disconnect from that. You disconnect from that sort of, and there's a way to do that. You can jump up and down, you can laugh, you can do something else, but you want to disassociate yourself from that. And then what I love to do is bring up a new memory of how they really want to feel, and find a memory that they themselves have felt that way. So, and they don't have to do it with medicine, by the way. So, when I'm working with clients, like they'll a lot of times say, well, I don't know if I can come up with something in my office that I felt that way, but I don't, it doesn't have to be that. It could be like, oh, they saw their child playing and they just felt this just massive love and peace. And that memory can be taken into this implicit memory that we're trying to change, to just bring the emotion into it. Okay. And I hope that doesn't sound too complicated. It's really not complicated. It's a very simple process, but there are some key things that have to be done in between to make it happen. And sometimes human beings are human beings. Sometimes it takes a while. And sometimes I figure out, the emotion part of it is not going to work for this person. Like, we need to do storytelling. And then that story, we got to get to a story at the end that transcends where they are. Like, yes, they're in this bad place, but where are they going? And getting them to share a story of transcendence.
Okay, this is so awesome. Let me see if you can help me with something I'm having issues with. I'm having to teach my third child to drive. And I don't remember me doing this with the others, but I am so reactive when he makes any kind of mistake. And I realize it's because when I was a young driver, in fact, 3 weeks after I got my driver's license, I rear-ended somebody and had like 3 or 4 other things happen over the next few years. And so I'm like wigging out every time he even gets out of the lane a little bit. But I think maybe it's because of all of that. So do I go back and relive that and then like pour the love of my love I have for my child into it to try to?
Yeah. So no, first, Laura, what you do is you start with the trigger. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we go back to the most recent time that you were driving with your child and mm-hmm. when the symptoms came up. And we would talk in detail about the exact things that happened and sort of timing when they occurred, what was going on, what did he do, what did you do, how did you feel, what were your physical and emotional symptoms. We go into very detail. This unlocks the memory. Again, you're starting with a trigger first. And then I have you feel those physical, you want to feel those symptoms. Most people can feel them pretty quickly once they start talking about it and what was going on with this. You're driving with your child. I'm sure I could get you to feel those emotions right then, and then we disassociate right away. And that disassociation, a lot of times I'm telling a stupid joke. I got to get new jokes, but or like I'm getting people to laugh, or I'm having them jump up and down, wave their arms, do silly stuff to just disassociate from that. But what that does is it opens up the memory. And then we go to the next step of tell me what you really want to feel, or how do the symptoms do you want to be able to do? And you would probably tell me what? Calm.
Yeah.
Peace, not reactive, that kind of thing. And then I'd ask you, when's the last time you felt that? Not with this scenario, but like any memory, anything that you could think of when you felt that way. And then we would discuss that memory in detail so you could start feeling that. And then what I have you do is sort of close your eyes and have you take the feeling that you have with that new memory that you were telling me about, and you walk back in driving with your kid in your mind.
That's awesome.
Is there any, I'm wondering, like, for particularly, are there any contraindications for this?
Let's talk that. Yes.
Okay. Because I'm like, I can see how, like, if it was something way off, that, like, maybe I need to be specifically trained or something for that.
Well, the thing is, you have to make sure that people are dysregulated and ready to do it. Okay. So sometimes the trauma experience is that people are very activated, and there is a nuance. So I don't typically dive into this until about the fourth session with people, third or fourth session, because a lot of times I am giving them tools to dysregulate themselves. Like you want them to be, a little calmer, not activated. You don't want them to be in fight or flight when they're on the phone already with you. Okay. So, and sometimes in order for them to get the gist, we will do something totally different than men mal. I mean, I will go to, something about what happened with their husband, or like something little, the dogs did something, something that they can handle. And then we'll move to that. But there is a nuance. So you do want to make sure that people are not activated. You don't want to rush them into it. And you never want to start with, so in Laura's case, she knows that she rear-ended this person way back when. You would never start with that way back when. You always go to the triggers first and work your way back. And I like to go from trigger to trigger to trigger back before we even get to that event, because you can't, especially if it's been more than a year, even 6 months to a year, it just doesn't, it's in there. It's been in there. And what we've been doing is we've been bringing up this memory and just making it more negative and more negative and more negative with our physical and emotional symptoms. We're reconsolidating it in the opposite direction, most of us, because that's the way our brains want us to think. When stuff like this happens in medicine, we label it unsafe. So our brain thinks our job's unsafe, everything's unsafe. And so now we're just reconsolidating it in the opposite direction we want it to go.
Oh my gosh, this is just so amazing. And apparently I have a lot of rewiring still to do. I think this all feels like it's a lifelong process, all this undoing of what's been done. But so if anyone wanted to try memory consolidation, what would be their next steps?
So next step is just reach out to somebody that you think would be, helpful, that does it, that knows about it. I think that's, a lot of physicians now are seeking coaches, which I love. I think it's fantastic, but I think I think us as coaches also should be trained in this if we're dealing with sort of types of situations like this, and it's not business or career, which might be a totally separate, but when you're talking about life coaching, everybody has had trauma. I don't care who you are, you have a human brain. You've all had it. It doesn't matter. And it will come up. It shows itself up in different ways, in different variations. But if people reach out to someone, whether it's a coach or therapist, they want to just be sure that they know it and that they could help them if that is something they want to work on, especially with med mal, bad outcomes, peer review process, anything in medicine that's like penalizing. We feel like we're being penalized for something. I think it is a trauma-like pathway. So that's first and foremost. I would just say, like I think you guys just had a podcast I listened to last week or the week before that they do it as well. And I think that that's fantastic for healthcare workers. So it's needed.
So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah. So they could just go to the medmalcoach.com, or they can look me up, Dr. Laura Fortner, on social media outlets. I'm happy to chat with anybody at any time, actually, or if you message me, I'm an open book and I'll chat with you. So I have no problem, talking to you for 10, 15 minutes and just seeing if you need something. Sometimes it's funny because that one phone call sometimes is all people need. Sometimes it's just like, I just need to tell my story in front of somebody that's been through it. And I do want to give you hope. Like med mal is not, it's an unfortunate part of our business. There is an emotional turmoil, and, the AMA does recognize it as the number one problem with medical malpractice is the emotional turmoil that the physician goes through. And so we don't want to disregard it, but sometimes just talking to somebody that's been through it can heal someone. And so reaching out is necessary, I think. And don't be afraid to do it, especially if you do it, in my realm. I just tell people, like coaches, most of us, you can even ask them, don't keep notes, don't keep charts on you. Therapists, they can subpoena them and they can take the charts, but we don't keep any of that. I don't record anything. I don't do any of that stuff. I am launching a wonderful program coming soon that you could walk in and be totally anonymous. And I'm doing that on purpose. I want that for you because I think you don't have to tell anybody your name. They won't even know who you are, but you will be able to get the benefit of learning how to do memory reconsolidation. You will have sessions with me that are video recorded that you could go through as if you were sitting across the room from me. And you could change your entire well-being in medicine. And I've created it specifically so you don't have to show your face if you don't want to, and you don't have to say who you are.
That is awesome. So for any of you who are wondering if she's really this safe of a person as she seems she is. She's that wonderful and authentic and so helpful. So Laura, any last thoughts for us?
No, I want to really change the face of medicine in this arena. But not only, and I'm just going to put this in here because I think it's so needed, in med mal in general. I think that we need reform, and I'm really wanting to change the face of what we go through to help us. And I think it can happen in the next 20 years of my life if I give the last part of my career to this. And I think we can make some massive change. It's just I don't know of anybody been willing to go around talking about getting sued like me.
Well, you are changing it. I have no doubt. And how much better would it be to practice medicine and not have to worry about that anymore?
Oh my God. Seriously, what an awesome question, Laura. Yeah, I think that's a great, how would we all feel? That safety would be huge for us.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all that you're doing.
Okay, and I just went to your website and I see that you're holding out on us 4 tools to stop intrusive thoughts. Click here. So is that a freebie that you have out right now?
Yes, it's a freebie. And then if you get on my email list, you'll hear all the details about the launch of this program. And I am, the first a few physicians that go through my first part of my program will actually get an amazing deal too. And so hopefully in January, it's going to be up and running. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yes, you guys heard it here first. So everybody go to Dr. Laura Fortner at medmalcoach.com and get signed up. And Laura, we thank you so much for coming on our podcast. You're always a gem, and everything that you presented here today is, not only a testimony of what you went through, but it takes a special person with a special kind of bravery and courage. So thank you so much for even just being the first one. Pioneering something is not always the easiest thing to do when you're stepping out in faith and just using everything that you went through. It takes a special kind of courage. And so we honor you for that. And thank you for sharing it with us. Thank you. We appreciate it. And click the link below to join our email list. If you're not already receiving our weekly well check, visit our website, www.thewholephysician.com, to get more information. So until next time, you are whole, you are a gift to medicine, and the work you do matters.
Thank you for joining us for the Drive Time Debrief. If this podcast has helped you, be sure to share it with others. Please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review so other doctors can find us. If you want to know more about what we do or work with us, go to our website at thewholephysician.com and schedule a free 30-minute strategy session. We'd love to help you create the life you dreamed of before things went awry. It's absolutely possible.